Unlearned Unlimited. What? Unlearned Unlimited. Yeah. Hey.
Welcome to Unlearned Unlimited. My name is Dr. Sito Narcisse, and I'm with my co-host,
Tatiana Echevarria.
Hey, what's going on? We're going to have a dope show today. As you know, today we have David Thomas in the house. And Mr. David Thomas, who's been in education for a long, long time, is going to talk to us about the title of this podcast, Tatiana, is, we call it The Education Divide.
The politics of education.
The politics of education. And who else would know more about that than the guy we are bringing on? You know, I always tell people there's people who work in the background of the backgrounds. And they're not only doing work in front of folks, but in behind closed doors. Mm-hmm. They're the ones really trying to figure out how things function to make sure that kids get what they need. Teachers are doing the good work, a lot of different things. And we're excited to have David Thomas with us. David, how are you?
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm excited about joining you all this morning on this phenomenal program, Unlearned and Unlimited. You all are doing some great work and taking the country by storm. And I am just honored and privileged to be joining you this morning.
Well, we're super excited. We should say we feel the privilege, right? Because today I feel like this conversation is gonna be more like insider baseball, Tatiana.
I know, right? Behind the scenes, we're gonna pull back the curtains. We're gonna get some tea. Let's talk about it.
So right. In our show, David, I know, when we had a conversation about bringing you on, we talk about things that we call it unlearned, things that you went through school and learned, and what's really going on, right? And then we have our
Unlimited.
And Unlimited is about the solutions, strategies, and things that we want to see going on to help move the work forward, right? It's a clash between education and culture.
Yes.
So this is kind of our big thing. So let me do what we always do. We did some homework on you.
Yeah.
Right. As we always do. But I'm going to just mention a few things about you. And then after that, we're going to let you, like we always do,
let our guests tell us from their perspective
who they are.
Yeah.
All right.
Not very good. We'll say.
Well, listen, you've been in education for about 30 plus years. We know that much. We know that you have served as a school board member. You've been also, I believe you are also the national chair of the National School Board Association. You've also been in the Council of Urban Boards of Education. You've done stuff for the co-chair for the governor of Alabama and Commission on Education Reform. Those are some of the highlights we know. We also know that you've done a lot of different stuff. I won't hold this one against you. I know you're a University of Alabama grad, so we have a Florida State person in the house. So
you and I may not be friends in a few weeks.
But we won't get into this part because that could be a long conversation on this show. Fighting words, but we'll let that go. But what we probably really don't know about, David, is your commitment of education you've been in for years. I know you've been the vice president of Rethink Education, which does a lot of great work in the country for kids that deal with whether it's social emotional learning or different sets of factors and stuff. And that's in some of the largest cities in the entire United States. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes.
Yeah. So listen, I know the bio and all that stuff. We'll let you talk about that a little bit, but I did want to highlight certain things because, people don't always know who are the folks we're talking to. And, you have been in this work for a long, long time and been successful in navigating some of the things. So we thought it'd be great for our audience to hear directly from you. When me and Tatiana talked about you as a guest, we was like, hey, who can give us the real on education and politics? And also, I guess, talk about it in a way that we can kind of help move things forward, especially as we are in a new season of education that seems at times to be polarizing. But we think that there's a lot of potential. What do you think?
No, I agree. And then I would also just love for our listeners and our watchers or viewers to hear a little bit of your backstory and, what led you to where you are. And I'm sure there's a lot of history there, right? Yeah. But just talk about, kind of your path and your trajectory into education and where the work that you're doing now.
Sure. Well, who I am, I'm David Thomas. I'm born in Mobile, in the great city of Mobile, Alabama. Uh, my, my mother and father, my only child. And education has always been a major part of my life. I've always grew up saying I did not want to go in education.
And then each of us end up doing that.
Yeah,
Isn't that crazy?
You have to be careful about those things that you say you will not do.
Mhm.
But how I got here, interestingly, everyone in my family, my mother and father grew up in a segregated South in the
Mm.
30s. My mother and her sister and many of our relatives, were the first ones to go to college in their families, having to go to segregated colleges, Alabama State University, and then graduate school from there. But for me and my family, education was the way up. In spite
Yes.
of all of the circumstances that surrounded them, they were driven to education. And as a result of that, being teachers and lifelong educators themselves, even without being intentional talking about education, it was always a part of who we are as a family. I always tell this story. I had a cousin who was a graduate of Tuskegee, and he was very intentional about all of the little cousins. Every time one of our cousins graduated from college, he made sure we all went to the graduation.
Wow.
That's beautiful.
Ever the graduation was, he took us to all of the graduations. So it was instilled in us without being preached to us that, hey, this is the path, this is trajectory, this is a must do, not a should do, but a must do. And so as growing up in a Black family in the South, and segregation, post segregation, education was always essential to the next step. And so as a result of that, I went to the University of Alabama, got my undergraduate degree in history. And then from there, I went to the University of South Alabama, got a master's in history, and began, I always very interested in history, particularly African-American history. So my specialization was U.S. history since 1877 with a subspecialty on the African-American experience. And that was important to me because, at that time when I was going to school, there was not a lot about African-American history being taught in schools. I remember when I was in the second grade, and there was a requirement in the second grade that you would always do a weekly book report. And so we'd go to the library and have to check out books. Well, when I turned in my book reports, they would not be accepted. And so my mother was like,
Wow.
why aren't you accepting his book reports? And she said, well, because he's turning in reports on books that were not checked out of the library. And the reason was because there were no books about Blacks in the library. And so all the books that I was doing my reports on were books I had at home and not books at school. So as a result of that, they began, ordering books on Black history and Black people. So it has always been a part of who I am. It's in my DNA about, I think it's important that we know who we are.
That's
And
right.
Absolutely.
That's right.
continue to
Absolutely.
tell that story. And, in our current politics of education, how
Climate.
they're trying to dismantle that, I think is even more important. And so, through my home, that being instilled in me, the church in having Black history programs and always reminding us how great we are. Other organizations, Jack and Jill and other organizations, always instill the greatness of who we are. And I guess that led to my professional career wanting to continue to tell that story.
Mm.
That's beautiful. So then you did,
So,
maybe this is a silly question, but maybe not. So you ended up being a history teacher, or what was
yeah,
your path
yeah.
once you started working in education?
Right. So I began teaching at Bishop State College, a local community college in Mobile, being a history teacher, teaching history. And then I opened the Black History Museum, Research Museum, and on African American culture at the college. Then I became the director of one of our campuses, the Southwest campus, and then vice president for workforce development. So that was that was my teaching career.
Hmm.
However, then as a result of that, and the work on the school board and having those national connections, uh, teamed up with a group out of Dallas, Texas, to look at um, the early stages of technology in education. I went to Texas A&M and got certificate programming around instructional technology. This was the early days, Sito, as you say. I've been in education for 40 years. But the early days of online education. So we began creating online courses for the college. And as a result of that, a group out of Texas contacted me about how could we use that in K-12. And there was a company called Grade Results where we did live online tutoring for credit recovery, creating what we call drop back in centers, where kids who were over age, undercredited, those who had been pushed out, kicked out, dropped out, could come back in and receive those credits to graduate with their high school diploma. And so
Wow.
I did that
So
for,
those are,
go ahead.
those are the early stages of like the credit recovery
Yeah,
type
that's
stuff.
correct. Early stages of credit recovery. And so
Yeah.
from Grade Results, moved over to a company called Excelify that did school-based Medicaid, looking at how schools could
Mm.
capture those federal dollars that they expended on providing the services for kids who needed those special ed services, IEP services, to capture more of the dollars back to the district to be used. And then from there, I went to Rethink Ed.
Oh, wow.
Wow. What a journey. Oh my goodness. So now can you tell us a little bit about the work that you specifically do with Rethink Ed, and what does like maybe like your day to day look like? I wonder, I'm sure it looks different from Monday through Friday, but tell us a little bit about the work that you do there.
So at Rethink Ed, as Sito alluded to, we started off as a company that focused on autism. It was originally called Rethink Autism. And so from there, it grew to Rethink Ed, where we provide professional development training, curriculum and content around social emotional learning, mental health, and more recently, behavior training and management. In these post-COVID days, a lot of districts, and Cito could attest to this, a lot of districts are seeing kids who are coming to school because they didn't have that early socialization experience in pre-K and K, have a lot of behaviors that have been unseen prior to COVID. And a lot of the professionals are not really trained to manage those behaviors. And so that's really one of the larger programs that we do as Rethink, is to work with professionals around behavior training and management to help reduce over-identification, particularly Black and brown kids. And, it's easy to focus on
Absolutely.
removing those kids from the classrooms. And now, especially since the president's executive order as of April that are, requiring districts to no longer document and collect the data around the demographics of the kids who are removed from classrooms. So it's really important that the professionals are trained around that, but then also working with students and families on managing those behaviors and how to regulate yourself in public and personal spaces.
And you guys have done really well. I mean, you guys are in some of the biggest school districts in the entire United States, right?
We are in 42 states, 8 of the 10 largest around the country, New York, LA, Miami, other places. So
yeah.
it's a
I mean,
daily
so it's a program
grind.
that's really working. The daily grind. Daily grind.
Daily
Well,
grind, yeah.
well, let's talk about the grind that nobody sees. Education and politics, right? So let's get right into it. One of the things we want to one is demystify some of the craziness, we call it, because there's things that people don't know between what happens, whether it's with superintendents, school boards, secretary of eds, mayors, governors, all these different dynamics that tend to happen that impacts schools, but has been so challenging in different ways that we've seen children and families and parents get impacted at home. And we'd love to kind of dissect that a little bit from each of these pieces, at least from your perspective, and talk about what are the politics that are actually getting in the way. And what are the things that you're like, hey, if I got to give y'all some advice to unlearn, because I mean, we open up the newspaper every day, and we will see superintendent.
You aged yourself a little bit there.
Okay,
You said opened up the newspaper.
We look at the social media, but I look at the newspaper still, right? but we open it up and we see this person got fired, or this board's dealing with this, or this whatever with this mayor. I mean, it's just like chaos upon chaos from city to city. And we're like, this can't be happening all over. But you see it from state to state, from city to city. So like help us, one, put this in perspective. And then number two, be like, here's the politics around this. What is the issue we're dealing with?
Well, yeah. And then you have such a unique lens as someone who's been on a school board. And that, I'm sure that perspective is one thing compared to what a superintendent's perspective is in how that interaction actually looks like and how it functions and how it works. So we have a little statistic here we wanted to share with you and ask you a question following up that information. So a 2023 study found that the average tenure of a big city superintendent, not context of what big city looks like, not entirely certain, but is only about 3.5 years. Okay. What would you say, in your opinion, as someone who's worked side by side in a chair role on a school board, what would you say is the main reason for that rapid turnover? And, how often is it due potentially to like a fractured relationship between superintendent and school board? That's a loaded question. So I'm very curious what you have to say there.
You can say what you want to say on this podcast.
We keep it real.
Yeah, we keep it real here.
and there may be a long answer.
That's okay. Let's do it.
School systems and school boards, unlike other governmental entities, everyone feels as if they know about school because they went.
Can you say that again, please? Say it louder for the people in the back.
I witnessed this and experienced it personally as when I served on the school board, but now more than ever, everyone feels as if they are an expert about education, specifically about the governance of education. Education has become a hot political issue. We've allowed politics of culture and race and economics to get in the way of real student achievement. And it's a political football. So going back to the question about the tenure of superintendents, I have seen over the last 10 or 15 years, I may get in trouble for this, but the decline in the quality of board members who are leading our nation's school districts.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Can you give a little bit more context? What do you mean by that in terms of their experience? Or?
In terms of, first of all, in terms of education themselves. When you look at a lot of school boards across this country, many of the board members have at minimum a high school diploma, have absolutely no experience in education, no experience in finance, no experience in business, no experience in governance. And they are elected on these political issues, CRT, which never existed in K-12. Firstly, all of these political hot issues that have absolutely nothing to do with teaching and learning, high quality teaching and learning, and making sure all kids have access to that. So as a result of that, we see all of these governors now who are getting involved in local school board elections. Florida's a great example of that. Getting
Florida
involved.
is a great example of that.
Florida's a great example of that, of governors getting involved in local school board elections, creating PACs to ensure that people are elected, not for educational reasons, but for political ideology, making sure that the right person gets on to carry out their agenda, which hurts kids. It really hurts all kids. Now we see with these ESAs and vouchers, all of these political issues have a negative impact on public education. And if you look at a lot of the state legislations this past session, many of states passed crazy legislation that sort of breaks down public education. I say it's for they're looking at the business side of education and how can we get a piece of that. I think people.
And when you talk about the piece,
go ahead, Sito.
When you talk about the piece, you're referring to the money, right? Because education, from a financial standpoint, comes with billions of dollars that people don't see. Every child costs an amount.
That's right. When you look at many of these districts across the country, the district is the largest employer of that local community in many of these places. If we break it down, it's the largest transportation operation in that community, the largest food service in that community, the largest construction industry in that community. These are tens, hundreds of millions of dollars that
and how many people they're employing, like you just mentioned.
Absolutely. Yes. And the families that they impact. So, those who are looking at it from that perspective and not really concerned about the quality of education, educating all kids, you can see the dismantling of public education in my opinion, for that very reason, to get at those dollars and not to improve education.
So let me ask you this question, which may sound a little controversial. Do you really believe that the school system by design today is really trying to educate all kids? Because it's something that you've heard for years. Oh, we want to educate all kids. Or would you say they're trying to educate different set of kids for different set of things that they want to see done in the pipeline of workforce development?
Yeah, no, it's not about educating all kids. If you look at some of these board agendas, and I'm a school board policy nerd. Just sometimes just look at agendas, board agendas. And if you look at the agendas, it really tells you, as the old saying, people put their money where their heart is and what they believe in. So look at these board agendas, and you can actually see the intentionality of these boards. And if the agenda is not, at the end of the day, if the agenda item does not go back to, is this good for kids? Is this increasing the quality of education for kids? Then it really should not be on the agenda. And so a lot of these agendas, again, are focused on these political issues that don't focus on educating all kids. Some kids, but not all kids.
And what about oh, good. I'm sorry.
No, and so that's where you see, going back to your earlier question, that's where you see the disconnect between the board and the superintendent,
Yeah.
because board members don't realize, and the more I am on the other side of the table, I see it more profoundly now. Board members do not realize that they're only policymakers. The superintendent and the staff, or the administrators, they're the ones who lead the districts on a day-to-day basis. But many board members try to be the board member and the superintendent. And when superintendents do not follow the directives of the board member in the administration of the district, that's where the conflict comes in. And so we see many good men and women leaving, many good men and women leaving because of this conflict.
So I think that takes, now that's a perfect transition to like what we want to, where I wanted to go next and dive a little bit deeper into that. So there's this like micromanagement, right? You have, these board members that want to micromanage what the superintendent does or doesn't do, right? And the superintendent, in most cases, right, wants what's best for children and wants to ensure that children are achieving and receiving high quality education and things of that nature. Now, the hope is that we're going to reach audiences and individuals that still want to pursue that career, right? And that career path of becoming superintendents and pouring into children and ending up with some sort of change that we need to see in school systems. So in your opinion, what is a suggestion? What is a little nugget of information for an individual, a man or a woman who's trying to pursue this work, but also understanding that it's inevitable that you're going to probably come across some micromanagement while you're thinking about students and, you want some sort of autonomy, because who doesn't in that role, right? What is a recommendation in order to kind of try to bring the two together and meet in the middle?
So,
or does it not happen?
And that too.
Over the years, I worked with many superintendents across the country, large urbans, rural, just superintendents across the spectrum. And what I have seen recently and try to be a support in the area, oftentimes when you see superintendents leaving a job for whatever the reason, it's not about student achievement. It's not about financial mismanagement. It's not something nefarious or criminal. It's political. And what I see in a lot of superintendents, they are trained to be instructional leaders. They're trained in finance. They're, all of the training that they receive, they lack political training.
Okay.
They lack political training. It's the politics that gets superintendents in trouble, not something that they've done, but being able to manage a lot of these very politically focused boards, being able to manage the personal agendas of the board members, being able to manage some of the individual district agendas of board members, how to run the district and also manage the politics is an art to be a successful superintendent, in my opinion.
And would you probably argue that when you look at those who have been consistent in that seat, it had more to do with politics and less to do with any kid doing good on a test or tests, or assessments, right? Would you agree with that?
I would agree. When a person becomes a superintendent, you build your team. I mean, you find you're a great instructional leader. You find you someone over in finance. You find a great HR person. You find someone who is an operational person. The superintendent really has to spend their time around the politics of the board, the politics of the community. You've got board members here, elected officials over here, parents and community there. How do you manage all of those political agendas and ideologies, but also at the same time educate kids? It's a tough job, but if we look at those who are in the job and I mean, as you said, not opening up the newspaper, Sito, but when you scroll through your phone and read these articles.
Right. You watch these folks, they make it, they didn't make it, and you're trying to figure out, well, how they were doing so good.
That's right. Or you
I
watch some of the board meetings online. Yeah.
But, I think it's also wild that we're even like the dialogue alone that we're having right now regarding the focus being on how you manage the political ideology of board members and their influence and all those things, when at the end of the day, we should be talking about kids. And that is insane to me when we continue to look at the deficits in achievement for children. I was just looking at, the NAEP,
Yes.
that is given to fourth graders. And I think it's also given to eighth graders and some other grade levels. And research shows that we are still underperforming significantly. And then when you dissect that data even more, Black and brown children perform even at much lower levels than their counterparts. And yet we are having a dialogue about superintendents keeping their jobs. And in order to do so, they have to manage politics, when we should be talking about, are we doing right by kids?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm convinced. Well, I don't know if I would say I'm convinced, but I would say is what I have watched over time, and David, maybe you could, enlighten me a little bit on this, but like, it feels more, I won't mention names because, I know a lot of different folks,
Right.
that the conversations are becoming more around surviving in those jobs and less about trying to actually do what's right. Right. And when you hear them talk about it, they always say, well, I just want to make sure I please this board member or this particular thing or this group, which may have nothing to do at all with a kid being able to read, right? And so the reason I'm bringing this portion up is because let's talk about how cities are playing and the government is playing even a bigger part in this craziness that's going on now, specifically because they don't believe in these bureaucracies, they would call it, anymore, right? So, so the U.S. Department of Education is about to get dismantled, right? This current president said, we're going to do that. They're going to put more centralized control per states, right? So the more dollars are going there to kind of see if we can have more innovation, those things. The question is, one, is that going to make boards and superintendent worlds more political or less? And two, is that going to help families more or less at the ground level to make sure their kid is getting what they need in that process? And the third piece, because there's 3 parts to this, is does the system work or not? Because there's a lot of these things been tried before, right? And so, like, what are your thoughts in those 3 particular areas?
My concern about the dismantling of the Department of Education is lack of accountability. For whatever it's worth, No Child Left Behind, when that was the policy of the day, it pulled back the curtain on accountability. At that time, there was no disaggregation of data. We would just look at the system in its totality and say, we have a 80% graduation rate. Wow, that's wonderful. Everyone was so excited. But when you pull back the curtain, is that 80% for all kids, 80% Black kids, brown kids, Black boys, white boys? No, we didn't have to do that. That's what No Child Left Behind did. Let's pull back the curtain. And are we attaining this achievement for all kids? And it held districts and states to a higher level of accountability. Now, what this is going to do, there will be no accountability. There will be no accountability in this, again, in this executive order he issued back in April. It speaks to the very issue around disaggregating data that schools no longer have to report on race and gender. But what does that do? That takes us back to the dark days of only a few kids achieving, and we don't have to be concerned about the other kids.
And what do you think about how cities and systems are playing their role in this? Because we also hear now mayors are getting more involved around kids' education, and how does that connect with, making sure that their cities become more economically vibrant, or they are creating a workforce? What do you think about those?
We have some cities that still have mayoral control over the districts. Chicago is sort of a hybrid model now with the mayor appointing some of the board members. Previously, he appointed all the board members. There are other cities that still have mayors involved in their districts. But even though many cities don't have a direct control and authority over the school district, it's incumbent upon mayors and cities to be very involved and to ensure that there is high quality education for all kids, because education is, in my opinion, the number one economic development driver. If you don't have a well-trained workforce, how can any city attract business and industry to that community if there's not a ready workforce available to take the jobs needed for the success of that incoming industry?
So, but then now my curiosity is, like, when we look at funding, though, when we look at funding for school districts, and specifically look at school districts that serve high poverty students.
Yes.
We recognize that they on average receive 15% less funding. And we know that funding is also tied to property, property taxes and things of that nature. Well, usually in those areas, property taxes are lower. So how do we mitigate the realities that these individuals that live in these areas usually have less access to high quality instruction, high quality educators, who do not necessarily choose to go teach there. Right. There's already a lack of resources. So you have all these kind of pegs that are working against these communities. How do we then translate that into really developing these individuals to be productive citizens in society, when they're not getting access to an education that sets them up to be able to do that?
Right. Again, that takes us back to the politics. Now we're seeing all of these states passing legislation that they call it whatever they want to call it, that allows parents to take the dollars kid out of the public school district and pay for private education. Come on, pay for private education. So we're removing dollars from districts that are already financially strained. Many states, particularly southern states, have legislation that limits the amount of property tax that can be levied against the people. Property taxes help pay for schools. Who does that hurt? Poor communities. It hurts
Poor kids.
Kids. Yeah.
We have a lot of these states who attract in their efforts to attract large industries to the states, give them tax abatements. So for many years, they don't have to pay taxes. Again, who does that hurt? So it goes back to the politics of education, and what legislators and local officials are doing. How does that impact those kids who really need the best education possible. You were talking about teachers being the highest quality teachers, not in serving the kids who have the highest needs. I was talking to a superintendent this week who's reached out to Rethink to help with a situation. At the beginning of the school year, this district has 459 non-certified teachers.
Wow.
That's what.
Wow.
In a state that allows teachers, once they attain tenure, to move. Well, we know where they're moving from. So all of the schools and the kids who have the highest needs will get the least qualified teachers in those classrooms.
And they're more than and I mean, I don't know the statistics around this, obviously, but then my follow-up question to that, or my follow-up wondering is, they have the least qualified teachers that are more than likely to experience turnover, is like what my thought process, my thought process goes.
That's absolutely correct. High turnover.
I mean, and we see high turnover with individuals who studied and went to school for education.
Yeah.
That's right.
And imagine those that didn't go through programs that specialized in that.
That's correct.
So this may be a little controversial. I'm going to ask you. So
Here you go. You always got to start. You always got to go.
So
here.
tell me the 5 states that you think, or the 5 cities you think they're on the right direction. And then tell me the 5 cities you think are a hot mess.
Oh, boy. I think he wants to keep his job. I'm just saying.
You're trying to get me in trouble.
I know.
Or all right, let's not talk about the hot messes. Let's just say,
or like the ones that are doing it right. Right?
Tell us the one. And the reason we bring this up is because, we talk about this whole thing around Unlimited. Like, there's so many stuff that's going on, right? But the reality is, what you start to hear more and more, at least in our conversations, is always the symptoms. Here's the problems. Here's this. This is the cause of this. This is the cause of that. We also said, when we started talking about this podcast, we got to start telling people, like, there are some places that are making progress. Now, there's no utopia or euphoria place, right? But there are some folks that are taking some right steps. And sometimes we find that people are shocked about certain places that are actually moving in the right direction more than other places that they think would be moving in the right direction.
Well, and then to your point, we had Malik Ray on last week, right?
Yeah.
And
part of Leading Now organization.
And he's part of the Leading Now organization, and he does a lot of work with superintendents. And one of the things that he talked about how keeping superintendents in the role and in the job and engaged and wanting to, stay on this path is community.
Right.
So I think by sharing this information, this also gives, maybe someone hears this and says, you know what, let me reach out to someone in said state, said district that's maybe doing something innovative, that's hitting the mark in a way, like 460 teachers that are not certified. Like maybe somebody's combating that in a way that can support them in navigating that issue they're facing.
Well, what do you think? What are some places
who's getting it right?
Let me first say, you have to be bold, and you know this, Sito, in your role. I mean, sometimes people don't want a bold leader, but if you are in that seat for the right reason, and again, yesterday was the first day of school in Mobile, and as part of the 100 Black Men, we go and we welcome the kids into the school. And I was
just got goosebumps. Love that.
Elementary school yesterday, and to see these pre-K kids getting out of the car with their little uniforms on and bow ties, and some of them crying, some of them anxious. Just see all of these great little bodies and people, 4 to 5 years old, and thinking about what is life going to be for them 12, 13 years from now, and who will impact what that life will look like. It's education. So when you sit in the seat of leadership, board or superintendent, if you're not there for the right reason for all kids, then you really have to ask yourself, is this really for me? And so going back, who's doing it right? I think there are several superintendents across the country who are doing it right, who are doing it well, but you have to be confident and bold in the leadership and always keep in front of you, I'm doing this to ensure that all kids, all meaning all kids, receive the highest quality of education possible. And, I know I may get some frowns when I say this, but the person who is doing it right, who to me has done it right for the past 15, 16 years is Superintendent Alberto Cavallo, who is now the superintendent in Los Angeles. He did it for 14 years in Miami, took the district from an F district to an A district. At that time, it was the fourth largest district in the country. High poverty, high ESL, and when you lead a district of that size, that magnitude, where there were no failing schools, and then take that same effort to Los Angeles, as he announced last week on the state scores, his schools outpaced the state of California for the first time. And so
Wow.
you have to be bold in your leadership. Be confident that, I'm doing this for the right reasons. If it costs me my job, so be it. I'm going to do what's right for all kids. And so, I mean, I that may be easy for me to say because it's not my job, but, I think God calls us for all that we do, and he will equip us. And if we don't walk in confidence about who I am and what I'm doing, one door closes, another one will open. That's just
That's right. That's right.
It's opinion.
That's right.
And if we do what's right, right will follow you.
That's right.
That makes me, as a South Florida girly myself, I am not a product of Miami-Dade County Schools. I am a product of Broward County Schools, which is also a large school district as well. But that makes me super happy to hear. Obviously, I didn't know that information in depth in that way, but shout out to Dade County Schools. That's awesome. It's awesome.
And what about, let me ask you this. One of the things we brushed it over a little bit was around this piece around innovation, right?
Yes.
You brought up and said, you did a lot of work around the space of workforce development, and you heard that kids sometimes are not getting what they need in terms of how they connect with workforce and those things, because now in the country, this is the most talked about issue, right?
Absolutely.
How are you getting kids prepared for jobs, right? AI is out. You have all these different ways. There's jobs that are being created that are not even created yet in the next couple of years.
Yes.
That's right.
You have more kids they think are going to change the families, and socioeconomics are going to change a whole lot because these kids will get into a workforce as in these different spaces. What are your thoughts about how this is becoming politically charged, of course, in its own way? And what are the things that you're seeing that can help move that needle into the innovation space that folks could think about in education?
We have to prepare kids for jobs that don't exist 15, 20 years from now. And as we see technology as a greater part of our lives, AI, the learning gap, in my opinion, is going to get wider if the resources are not there to prepare and expose, and kids have access to this innovation. Schools can't wait to high school to teach technology, coding, AI. I think it should start the day that these little pre-K kids I saw yesterday, they should have exposure to technology and AI, and that continue on for their entire school career, because the world is moving in that direction, and those who have access will be successful. Those who do not have access will not, and the gap is going to get wider. So in preparing, a workforce for this next generation, we have to ensure that these kids have the technical skills, but also the soft skills to be successful
Say that again, please.
in the workspace. And I don't think we I think we sort of compartmentalize what they call CTE, career tech education, but I think every kid should have exposure to those elements because soft skills translate to every industry, not just the workforce industry, but every aspect of your life. You need to have those soft skills, but then also those hard skills that will prepare this next generation to take jobs that don't exist today, but will require a higher level of integration into technology.
Now, what would you say are like the top 3 soft skills that you're referring to? Because I understand soft skills as one thing, right? And to like our audience, what would you say? And, we kind of have pivoted in the state of Florida to say soft skills for some things. So what would you say are like the top 3 soft skills that are not just applicable in the workforce, but also just life skills in general?
In my opinion, resiliency is number one. You have to be resilient. Every as we see in schools and I work through Rethink Ed, we're going to face challenges and obstacles every day. But and sometimes people respond in a way where one bad incident takes them out. They withdraw from the pursuit of their goals because that happened to me, I'm done. Kids, adults, we all have to learn and grow into a level of resiliency that we can bounce back from bad mistakes, bad problems. It's if it doesn't kill you, you've got to bounce back.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right. That's
say
right.
that again. All right,
right.
awesome. So resiliency, what else?
Resiliency, self-regulation, being able just to regulate yourself. We really have to teach more around self-regulation in our own space and other spaces, being able to self-regulate. And I would think that the next, in my opinion, soft skills is just showing up. And how we show up is important.
What do you think? Is there a shocking truth you would say that you realize in your journey that you get concerned about the parents or people in the system or political folks do not know when it comes to education? Like you're like, this is the shocking truth about where things are that has kind of been like, you're like, wait a minute, I can't believe this is, people can't see this.
We see education through our own lens, and particularly for parents who have kids in schools, we see education through our kids' school. And then we see it through our kids' teacher. Oh, Mr. Narcisse is a great teacher. So the school is doing well because I like Mr. Narcisse. And we step back and see it in its totality. Yes, my kid may be doing well, but is the kid in Mr. Thomas's class, are those kids doing, is Mr. Thomas a really good teacher? Or, is my school a great school, but the school across town, is it a good school? So I think we don't look at education in its totality. We look at it from our own particular personal lens and not consider all of the kids and all of the schools and, are the kids across town getting the same level of instruction that my kid's getting? Same.
And I would also, go ahead. I'm so sorry.
No,
Go ahead.
same access and opportunities that my kids are getting.
And I would also venture to say sometimes, and I remember this in the classroom, parents would also look at education through their educational experience.
Exactly.
So they very quickly would say, well, I didn't do this in school. Well, when I was in school, we did it like this. And like, I taught it like this. And I don't get how y'all teach this new math. I was a math teacher, so I heard that all the time. You know, and it was very hard to sometimes get them on board to be like, hey, I know I'm teaching them how to do something a different way or a new way. And part of that is, you know, you talk about soft skills. It's like, I'm also teaching them resiliency through learning something new in a different way.
That's right.
But you don't see it that way. You just see it as like, well, I just want to teach it to them that way. I learned it this way. Or even, you know, when I had to dismantle the whole like, well, yes, math was hard for mom, but that doesn't mean math has to be hard for you.
Right.
You know, things of that nature. So I agree with everything you said. And then also just how parents look at education through their own lens and how that through their experience that they had in schooling. And that does have a heavy influence on their children's educational experience as well.
We hear oftentimes many people say, well, those parents are not involved. They're not engaged. They don't care. But we don't understand that some of those parents didn't have a good experience when they were going to school.
That's right.
And because they did not have a good experience, then again, that impacts their kids. So that's why schools and communities have to be open and inviting to ensure that, you know, parents feel welcome, parents are engaged, parents are involved, to make them feel like, okay, this is for me, this is for my kid, regardless of the experience that I may have had, you know, when I was in school.
Yes.
Redesign for me the ecosystem, according to David Thomas, for politics and education. Redesign that. If I said to you, hey, you are now the guy that's the architect.
That's a heavy responsibility there.
Of education, so the system can function the way it needs to be functioned. Redesign that for me. Tell me, what would that look like according to David Thomas?
That's a good closing there.
If I'm answering this, do you have a job for me when this is over?
Absolutely. You'd be the third co-host. Come on.
I need somebody to my right. All right, let's do this.
I would change how we govern education, the governance model. Now, what that may or may not look like, but we have to give those who lead these districts more authority and autonomy and create distance between educating kids and the politics of the governance. Now, what that model may or may not look like, but we school leaders have to have more autonomy and authority to educate kids and not be concerned about the politics and the ramifications of focusing on children and instruction as opposed to political agendas.
You know, I may get some backlash for this, and I acknowledge this, but I would also say in doing that, you know how we have kids shadow, like when they're in 5th grade, they shadow like 6th grade to like see what that's like. In an ideal world where we have trust and belief that these individuals are really doing the work and want what's best for kids, I would love for parents to have the ability to sit in the passenger seat and see the work that superintendents do, see the work that principals do, see the work that teachers do. You know what? See the work that the cafeteria workers do and the custodial staff and everyone that makes the system run. Okay.
That's right.
I'm going to get some backlash for that. I'm going to be like, I don't want these people seeing up, you know, but in an ideal world where there was trust, I would also add that layer because I think that there is such huge distrust in school systems right now. And there's so much heavy involvement with politics and this and that. I think that would be a beautiful thing because you really don't know someone's journey until you walk their walk.
That's right. I mean, there's such a distrust right now in just government systems in general.
Yes.
I think we've had a few guests come on and talked a lot about that. and how that has changed perspective and the polarization of education
Yes.
in a lot of different spaces. And so I just think, I would agree that, yes, you should let people see, but as long as they're not putting on a dog and pony show.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
I can remember being in rooms, when the governor's coming to visit or this person's coming to visit, whoever it is, and they're mapping out piece by piece, second by second, what it should look like.
Right. It needs to be genuine.
It's a whole different pressure. Yeah. And I don't know if I think let me put it this way. I think we live in a space now that the political correctness is gone from my perspective.
Yes.
And the distrust is so bad and the polarization. I think people are more now around I'm just going to get mine, or I'm going to prove my point. I always frame it as tribal, the conversations that happen now. I got my camp, you got your camp, instead of really trying to create a bridge
like bring our camps
of understanding and say, hey, let's agree to move forward. I think those days, unfortunately, are long gone. I mean, look at how things are happening with politics. I mean, that has preset the tone, and you watch that trickle effect into any governance model in schools and those things that deal with any sorts of politics, right? And now it's sad to say we talk to now so many different people in different parts of the education system. And one of the common themes you hear all the time, whether it's a teacher, superintendent, whoever, board member, is always survival. Never about how do we do this to innovate? How do we make this better for our community? It's like, how do I need to show whoever I'm talking to, I got it all together. Number two, I need to make sure that I'm playing in a safe space. But the third part is you never hear them talk about a solution.
Right.
Never. Right.
Right.
And so I was like, I can remember sitting in these conversations. I'm like, in this whole 2 hours, you've never said to me, should do this, this, and this, or and so we've gotten to this point where it has become such a challenging space, but we still have the same sets of complexities in America.
Right.
I don't think our complexities have changed.
No.
I do think how we approach things have been different. Our tolerance level has been different. Technology has now, from my perspective, closing the gap to see things, or seeing a lot of opinions, right?
Yes.
With no experience, right? And so I just think that those are the things that I think that have really changed our dynamics. So, well, David, we're going to let you get one last word before we close out. What can we be hopeful for, David? I know we talked about a lot of things, and in politics, I don't know if there is a hopeful in politics. I think, or is it a side? I don't know what's the word they say, but what can we be hopeful for in this new space?
We can be, I think, because of the current state of politics, more people are attuned to politics. People are getting more engaged in politics at all levels, even at the school level, regardless of the outcome at some of these local board meetings and with schools. We see a greater level of involvement. So I'm hopeful that more and more parents become involved in the politics of education. These local school board elections usually are at the bottom of the ballot. So we have to focus bottom of the ballot. We have to make sure that we get the right people elected to these school boards. School board members are essential. Yes, we have mayors and governors and representatives, but those people who are responsible for the policy that ensures that your kid has a chance, we have to become more involved in these local school board elections. We identify high quality people to run for these local school boards. So I'm very hopeful that these communities, local communities, will focus more on the outcome and the governance, those who are governing at the local level, and to ensure that our kids have a chance. And then back to your earlier question, school districts also have to tell their story better. There are great things across this country in all school districts, but that's drowned out by the political noise. Districts have to tell their own story, define who they are, and not let politicians define them.
Well, and I think to that point too, I think some of the accolades also drown out the other aspects that really need to be addressed.
That's correct.
So as much as we celebrate
Yes.
the amazing things that are happening, we also need to be willing to discuss the gaps that still need to be filled,
That's
because
exactly.
oftentimes those gaps
Yep.
include students that look like us.
That
That's
is
right.
correct.
That's right.
So
That's
That
right.
is correct.
Well, David, we're thankful that you came to join us.
what a
Thank
great
you.
conversation.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you, David.
I'm
so
honored.
much to come.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we're hopeful that the next time, we can get you in person to come
Yeah.
to the studio and we can talk some more about these education and politics. Because politics never goes away.
Ain't that the truth?
It never will.
Never go. Well, one other thing we wanted to ask you: are you doing anything for I know Congressional Black Caucus is coming up. Is there anything you guys are going to be doing during that time? I know you guys are always doing something around education.
Yeah, with the Congressional Black Caucus having several superintendents come in to meet with some of the Congress people and have a half-day forum around, again, the politics of education, that the rapidly changing landscape of politics, and how superintendents can work with their representatives to ensure that the legislation that's taking place does not negatively impact the kids and communities that they serve, and to hear from the practitioners.
Is there a date? Is there a date for that? When is that happening?
September the 25th.
Okay, so that's soon. Okay.
Yeah,
That's around the
because
corner.
Congressional Black Caucus is during that weekend, correct? Yeah.
That's correct.
So, we can get more information out to our audience and different folks around that.
How can people connect with you if they want to learn more about the work that you do, or just say like, man, that was a great point you made, I want to talk about that some more. How can they connect with you?
My email, always through email, is david.thomas@rethinked.com, or any of the social media platforms.
Awesome.
That'll work. Well, we'll put that in some of our handlers for everybody to reach out. Thank you so much again, David, for coming on Unlearned Unlimited. I think we had a great show. If you like the topics that we're coming across, please make sure that you share, like, subscribe on our show. Also, if you want to make any contributions, please do so as well. It's always important that we are getting the truth out about the work that we're doing, both in K-12 and at the higher levels of education and higher ed. We're super excited about this topic. And if you want more topics like this, put in the comments, make some suggestions to us as we get our guests to come on to make sure that we can talk about it. We were really always excited about education and politics. We're going to bring back David Thomas again to come back in person with some other folks as well. But, folks that are always engaged in this work, that are at the ground level, that are doing the day-to-day, is who we love to talk to the most, because that's where we learn about the unlearned and the unlimited works that we actually do in this work. So again, make sure that you share, like, subscribe, and I think we got another banger show.
Let's do it.
All right. Thank you. Look forward to see you guys again. Thanks, David.
Unlimited, 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 unlimited.